What changes when you lead with one act of vulnerability your team actually needs to see this week? Hi there, I'm Greg Venning. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractor podcast. If bonuses, policy manuals, pep talks, incentives, if they're falling flat, then this conversation shows a better way to be managing your team. We explore how to enroll your team by meeting them where they are at, using the Innate Model to tailor inspiration, teaching, coaching, and pressure testing. Expect simple actions that you can use this week, like a not me behavior reset or running the Innate Model quiz with your team and using vulnerability to unlock growth. The outcome is more ease in communication and real ascension for your practice members, team, and associates. This is a powerful episode. As always, if you listen to something that you think a friend or a colleague could do with hearing, please forward this on to them. And please subscribe if you're on YouTube, or give us an up to 5-star rating on whichever audio platform you're on. Listen on. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractic podcast. We help you grow as visionary, vitalistic, and capable chiropractors who are always on. We do things differently as we help to elegantly awaken your innate wisdom within. We help you create robust, predictable, and trustworthy practices that serve oceans of people and yet still have free time for yourselves and your families. We use neuroscience to deliver better business results so that you can get greater, deeper, and more effective impact in more ways. We are Questing Chiropractors, and this is our story.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, Nimrod.
Great to be chatting with you again.
Likewise.
Yeah, fantastic. So I know today's conversation is a really interesting one. We're taking a little bit further the idea that we would love to help people grow and transform in our team and maybe in the practice as well. And sometimes we go about it, I guess, like a child stumbling through a jungle. Doesn't get very far. Comes across many problems. What's coming top of mind for you about this?
Well, one of the more common statements we get from chiropractors, and usually in the form of frustration and complaining about either the associates or the team, that they just don't get it. You know, I've told them again and again and again. I sometimes even yell at them. I'm just like really frustrated with this. I try to inspire them. I give them bonuses to do certain things and give them all the information they ever need. The policy manual is amazing, and still it doesn't get done. It's just, things just don't seem to connect with them sometimes. And I'm sure it's me, but I don't know what to do. So, I can't blame generations. I can't blame, gender. I can't blame any skill level. It's like, I'm sure it's with me.
Yeah. Are you sure we can't blame everyone else? It seems so easy. So the topic we're looking at is how to help people find that spark within them to transform, and maybe a better way to do it rather than carrots and sticks and pay more and throw a procedure manual at them, but maybe something a bit more nuanced and maybe even a bit more human in their journey as they're questing with us in our practice. Is that capturing where you're going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are on a quest as an individual and as a practice, and, we've joined forces because we love what we're doing, and others love what we're doing, and they love what they're doing, and we love what they're doing. So there's a synergy there. There's a unified purpose, and that's really cool. When human beings get together, no matter how unified they are with the purpose, there is still a huge arrangement of deviation from that purpose in terms of their deliveries. Neurologically, we're all different. We see the world differently, even though we may have the same or similar values that trigger us and therefore draws us together. So the question is, well, how do we communicate more accurately with people given the differences? And so that was a product of, for me, searching for many years in terms of, well, these personality profiles are quite cool. They're sort of almost like party games, and it's often so accurate. So that's where the Innate Model came from. It's just a combination of over 200 different personality profilings. But it's very useful from this position that if you know where the person is coming from neurologically, what their preferences are, what their preferred means of communication is, then you can be quite targeted with that particular approach. And so we'll assume one-on-one at this point, although one-on-one group, is a combination of all of them. But let's go one-on-one just to break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
As we know, there's 4 quadrants within the brain from a sagittal perspective, the right and the left, and the front and the back. So that leaves us with 4 quadrants, which do have very different ways of seeing the world and working within the world. So that's sort of the element that we've found works really well. And I'm happy to go through that if you like.
So just before we do, just to give an outline of what we're really looking at here is that if we do want to help our people in our team to grow and develop and evolve and reach more of our own practices, mission and values, then doing what we've done doesn't work, because it's not individualizing to the person, the human that's right in front of us. And what can help is, as you're looking at it through the lens of the innate model, gives us a much more nuanced look at the person that's actually interacting with us and how they may view the world. And so seeing that really helps us put ourselves in their shoes and be able to speak their language, whether that's verbally or otherwise, as I'm sure you'll get into, which really helps bring them alive. And that's really the 3 points we're looking at, that what you've been doing may work to an extent, but it's going to hit some barriers. There's actually a better way to do it, which is more nuanced and individualized. And then the way to understand that is through these different quadrants, and the idea that we generally, within the role, within the practice we have today, we sit within one preference of a quadrant, even though we can flow through all of them. Would that be a pretty good picture of where we're going?
Yeah, and the first step on that one is to know where we're coming from. So our preference may be to inspire, and that's for other chiropractors. Many chiropractors show that. The other one would probably be more of coaching, but they're both right brain functions. But we start with the quadrant one, which is to inspire. That will resonate with some people. But you tell a story that allows them to see a compelling future, bigger scene ahead of them. It is very, very visual to look into the future, and they know where we're going because there's a vision for that future. Sometimes that's all it takes to light a person up. I mean, they're just, I get it. Okay, this is me. And the reflection of my introduction to chiropractic, it was not through any bodily thing. In fact, I'd never seen a chiropractor, but even by the time I got to chiropractic college, that it was the inspiration of 2 students who told me within a couple of hours, they expressed chiropractic. They didn't even tell me. I couldn't remember one word of what they said, but it made sense at a deeper level. So, that is an influence from an inspirational viewpoint. And for me, that worked really well. And, it still does. Returning to purpose is a really important thing for me. And I do get distracted into different areas. And so, calling myself into that level of mission is a critical factor for me. So, and people are different. People will see it that way, and some do. So when the person does, then they're on board. They're ready to receive information. They're ready to apply it in a way that gets results and outcomes, and then they're willing to shift and change it and to experience it, pull it apart and put it together in different ways. So that's a really cool starting point. So in terms of team, it'd be useful to know where your team stands on this. Have them do the innate model quiz and have a discussion around that, because there will be certain people in your team who resonate really strongly with that quadrant one, likewise with each of the other quadrants. Maybe not as many with quadrant four, but we'll discuss that in a sec. Yeah. So that would be an entry point. That if you identify those people, or you're going one-on-one with a person who does quadrant one really well, then paint the vision of where we're going and watch them light up. Physically, they will light up with that. And they're on board.
So, Mike, just to go a little bit deeper on this quadrant before we do move on, if we've identified someone else on our team, let's say an associate who's quite high in quadrant one, can you give us a quick example of how they would be when they're interacting with us as a principal chiropractor, and also how they will respond when we get this right, this communication and inspiration?
Okay, so how they would be around where are we going? What are we doing? What's my future? How do you see that? And it could be come through many ways, and such as service and remuneration and satisfaction and so forth. But that person wants to feel what it's like into the future now, right? So, and it's willing to disregard all the problems and all the obstacles and the things that stand in the way. So that becomes a marker, at least, of where we're going with them in our conversations. Always look to the future and go big, generalize, romanticize, and they will catch fire with that. Obviously, when they catch fire, you'll see it. They get enthusiastic and they want to participate, and they'll move towards us at that level.
Great. So just to summarize on this one, someone who is quadrant one preference, especially in your team, an associate maybe, you'll pick it up by getting everyone to do the innate model, and they'll use words like what's happening next, what's the big idea here, what are the amazing results from what we're seeing, overgeneralizing and exaggerating these things. And when you communicate on their wavelength and help them evolve and inspire on their wavelength, then they truly come alive. They're like these fidgety little kids that can't wait to get going and get this all happening.
Yeah, and they'll relate to stories around people getting really inspired with the results of their care and the type of care. The type of care is really important to them too. It's not so much, even to some degree, not even the results. It's the experience of being there, the things that have occurred, and the fact that they're out there yelling from the rooftops and telling them. So that's really inspiring to them because it's getting it out there. So
yeah. Beautiful. Great. So contrary to that, we'd dive right down into the hindbrain opposite quadrant.
Yeah. So, the basal area on the left wants to make sure we're safe, make sure that we're surviving, that we're secure. And so it's going to be always looking for problems, always looking for an exception, looking for ways in which it won't work. And they're going to go back into their past. So this is an orientation towards what's happened in the past. So it needs information. This is an area where it really loves to get taught from an authority in a way that is defensible, that has references, that written articles, has letters after their name. That's the nature of the quadrant 2 part, which wants teaching. So we apply our flexibility, no matter what area we come from personally, to a person who does this well in a teaching format. So that's going to be specific systems and procedures that will get the certain result. It will get rid of a lot of the fluff. It wants the bullet points. It wants things in an order, on structure and orientation around that structure. So that then makes them feel very comfortable. You'll find that there's not as many chiros that sit in this area once they've got their feet under the table within a practice. But initially, because they've come out of an academic institution, their whole primary and secondary education plus chiropractic college, they're going to be pretty well indoctrinated into that quadrant 2 reference frame. And, they want to be right. And so they're looking for an A, and this is one of the big disappointments that many newbies in chiropractic as chiropractors have real frustration with, because their practice members don't give them an A or a B or a C, at least, unless they're specifically asked, and that would be, not necessarily a thing that they could come up with very accurately anyway, because they vote with their feet, they vote with their money, and the levels of achievement to register at a kinesthetic level have to be in terms of data. So, they feel good when they know that they're correct and they know they're right. So they're not willing to make risks or take risks. And this is where teaching has to be pedagogically appropriate and rational and lineal and staged. So that person, say, for example, if we're coming from that position, it's a match made in heaven. We can talk about all the research studies under the sun and go all night long. When you're coming from a different position, so we say the quadrant 1 we've just discussed, a big, hairy, audacious, future-oriented thing. It is about making sure that we've got systems in place that do the job of the teach. we have something to follow through on, because our word will travel all over the place. We zig and zag and so forth. When we're talking, we get lots of stories and metaphors. This part, what's the facts? Just give me the data, and I need to have it sorted, and I'll take the policy manual and I'll rewrite it for you if you like, but I want to make sure that it's correct. So now also into this, as we're building this, an inspiring story doesn't hurt. I mean, it'll be, by the quadrant 2 part, it'll sort of dismiss it to some degree, and we'll take a little bit of the feel-good factor on. And that then will help to guide the teaching elements, because if we don't get what the purpose is, or to get what values we're coming from, then teaching is, and information receivable is there's information that just stacks on top of one another. It becomes sort of constipated with information. And whereas the inspiration is the breathing in of life and light. And so if we can mix the two together, that becomes much more meaningful. The person, even if they do a hard line quadrant 2 path, which is, to teach me, if we've got some stories with it, that's great. So that's like, for example, case of the week at the team meetings, so you can put that out there, case of the week, and that's going to bring the quadrant 1's alive straight away. The quadrant 2 part is going to be inspired to some degree with the results, but it will actually ask itself a lot more questions. How is that possible? Does the current research support this, and so forth? So that's where following through with some information in a teaching method that is layered is really valuable on that basis of some inspiration.
Yeah, I know that for me, when I'm working with teams where there can be often some new grads who lean quite heavily in the preference of this quadrant 2, and they love the teaching, but they also love to be taught, right? It's interesting that the word teach comes from an old word that relates to show, to demonstrate, to be able to point something out. It's related to the word token. So, they want a token of information or insight happening there. And it happens in these kind of, just like information, in bits, right? And so when I do work with people who sit in this preference, then a case of the week is not only first an inspirational moment, it's also a teaching opportunity. So, turning it around to let's breathe it in, let's be inspired, and let's use it to learn something from it. So throwing out some questions like, how could it be that is biologically plausible or chiropractically congruent? And just challenging these quadrant 2 preferences to shuffle around a little bit and pull on their data and information and knowledge and science and research, and start to consider how this could all integrate together in a way that is systematic and procedural and understandable.
Yes, yeah. I think this area is willing to look at things critically and analyze critically. However, there are biases that are there from the history, and this is very much a reference to history on this left brain phenomenon. So, it is about weeding that out, because biases can be very strong, and intelligence has nothing to do with common sense, or there's sort of an idea here that because the person has a high IQ, that they're going to be easy to teach, or that they're going to pick up on things and do things in a logical way even. And it's not necessarily true. So, but this part does thrive on information and teaching information. And if we come out of any other way, it's going to see it as very suspicious.
It's very cynical and skeptical of stuff that's not, be able to be empirically backed up.
Exactly.
So I think we get a good sense of what that preference is, and also how we would pick it up. And when we do speak within their preference, within that teaching mode of information and critique, how would they respond? How would we know that we've jumped in and done a good job there?
The usual response on that one is, you said this and this and this and this, and is that correct? They want to be sure that they're understanding things. So it does need to be broken down into bite-sized pieces, and in ways in which they will, with structure and order, is befitting of the significance of the content. So making sure that we're not making light of something, or catastrophizing, or, weighing things up too heavily in the emotional component. So, there's, rather than sort of say, let's talk about how to do a report of findings, it would be broken down into, okay, first you do this and then you do that, and here's an inflection point here, and then you go on to this and so forth. So in other words, it's very prescriptive, and it likes to have the scripts written out so they can copy them and duplicate them. The Quadrant 1 part will bring in all sorts of things that aren't on script, and it's quite in the moment, whereas this is now, okay, this is what we're supposed to say, and we will do it. And
yeah, so let's not get diverted into comparing different quadrants. I think we could be here for quite a while. So again, this is my quadrant 2 coming through, proceduralized and systematized into protocol. So we've looked at that quadrant 2, which sits in the hindbrain and orientates towards the past, is rational and cognitive, and will often dismiss the emotional part, which I think is a great segue into quadrant 3.
Yeah, well, if we're looking at trail of information in a communication cycle, then 3 is the next position. That once we've got some data, we want to look at how we can place this into context in terms of application. So that's the quadrant 3 parts. These are all interdependent. And if a person has, by virtue of their current position, doing a quadrant 3 greater than quadrant, say, 2 or 1, then they will weigh heavily into this area. I think it's worth noting too that we have all parts. There's nothing missing. Everyone has all parts, and certain parts have been used, and therefore the more we use them, so that neurons fire together, wire together. So this is a phenomenon of quadrant 3, which would show in terms of the application of the taught material based on the inspired state. Within that, then we'll have a structure of coaching where we want the person to do it, whatever it is, and we're willing to sit beside them and guide them through it, and then let them try it and give them feedback, but very gently, because it is sensitive, because it wants to please everyone. So there's an element here in the quadrant 3 part which has to be respected in terms of it doesn't want to upset anyone, doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings and so forth. So when we approach that, we do that with the same reverence. We could still tell a story, and they would relate to a story of success. Say, for example, in case management, it would give them relevance to approach the quadrant 2 part and take out the content of what is key to the application. They want to know, how do I do this? Show me how. Can I have people help me? This part tends to gather around people who are similarly involved and think in a similar way and behave in a certain way. So there's an element here that if we can do the coaching, and sometimes we're a busy chiro, we have a number of associates on, then how do we plan for our practice to be a coach to them? And often it's a CA who will step up, and knowing where they're coming from in this context, they won't be put off by the fact that this person's a CA, as maybe the quadrant 2 part will, because they want to come have it from the chief or from a higher authority. The 3 part is very happy to buddy up with a CA to guide them through that part of them through a certain process.
Yep.
So, and this where CAs can be incredibly valuable, particularly for the 3 parts, because they are more equal, and it doesn't like to have that hierarchical thing that the quadrant 2 does. So I think it's a very useful thing to be aware of, that we can find the best people for the best outcomes here. And if we have someone who does quadrant 3 really well, connecting them up with another quadrant 3 part, a person who does that well, because they're going to support each other. They'll challenge each other a little bit, but mainly support. And, there'll be lots of hugs or high fives or whatever, but they'll actually do that job quite well. And particularly if that isn't your sweet spot, then it's important to make sure that they get approached in their model of the world. And so it might mean finding someone else to do it. So And it's the same with every one of these stages. You look at matching up people who are going to resonate most with where that person's at.
And not only the person, but the actual development we're wanting. So I have two new associates at the moment. One of them is, on the young side, straight from high school to college and then straight to me as a position. And going through the Quest Yes Yes consult in the first visit, he was seeing it Quadrant 2 procedural, just go through it step by step. And we saw this through observing some video recordings of his first visit. And so I pointed out to him the benefit of giving space and breadth to that interaction. And he was really open to being developed in that. So I got my CA, who does my first visits for me, to jump in and do the development with him. And he came alive with that process of her helping him through the communication, connection, relationship, rapport part of that yes, yes. So, by no means does it mean, as you said, that the principal chiropractor has to be all of these things. To me, coach makes me think of those carriages drawn by horses. We're sitting in there together. That's what that coach is. And we're, pulling the horses or directing the horses to take us in the same direction as we go on this little trip together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very sociocentric group or viewpoint. I like to have people around. We say the Quadrant 2 partners would do their best work if they're not being interfered with too much in terms of other people, in the back room doing the books and so forth. It is a happy place for that part of us that likes to do, or sometimes has to do, that particular area. But I think that's in the context of this conversation, it's like, how do we apply the most appropriate things to the situation or to the person and deliver accordingly. So, coaching is a highly charged or energetic part of the Quadrant 3. Likes to be broke.
So, I think we covered pretty well there what that looks like, how we would communicate and develop with the person in that preference, and also how they would respond through that real social coming together, leaning into skills development and being able to apply. That's what they're really looking for there.
Yeah, it's hands-on. I mean, it's just like, it does involve touch. It involves kinesthetics. You'll find that the person who resonates highly in the Quadrant 3 part is, will probably touch you, just hand on shoulders or like hugs and, likes to get close. And that's the closeness of getting information across or getting an idea across, is sitting beside them, not confronting them, being beside them, working with them on a given project or phenomena that may involve one-on-one as well, so that there's no other distractions there too. So it may be useful, but at the same time, it will then help other people in the same way. The Quadrant 3 can be used in different ways, whereas the Quadrant 2 part is more one-on-one and one group for the Inspire part.
Which leaves one quadrant.
Yeah, so that then comes the testing of the productivity. So in other words, there's been an idea, there's been an information distribution, there's been an application one, real hands-on. Then it goes into more of a refinement sort of attitude, which is like, well, let's experience it. Let's put this system under pressure. So the challenge is thrown, and this is where, when you're relating to the Quadrant 4 part, it likes the challenge of the race, that part of us that is willing to take on something, say yes to it before we really think it through and just jump in and make it work, delegate where possible. So it won't necessarily do all the work, but it will see the bigger picture. Once the result, once the bottom line, bullet pointed result that one would be after, this basically comes from the Quadrant 3 part, passes it up. So here, then, if we're working with the Quadrant 4 part, it's not about telling them anything. That Quadrant 4 part is quite intuitive, and it will certainly want to do its own thought process. However, it can be guided by dropping ideas and stories, particularly because it's now forebrain, so it likes stories, to look at how it is that they could make this better, what someone else has done in the past to stimulate the further inquiry that this might need. So there's a number of areas here where the Quadrant 4 part does not need a lot of direct challenge. And so if you have someone who does Quadrant 4, I would lean towards telling stories about a similar circumstance or situation that someone overcame and got a great result from. Because it is quite results oriented. So it likes to mess things up so that then see how it flies and then do the repair work, right? So I'll come up with all sorts of solutions around that. So the quadrant 4 is not as common. We've done tens of thousands of these quizzes, and quadrant 4 in the chiropractic world is not as common at all. So it's overpowered by the quadrant 3 part, which likes a more subdued approach rather than the sort of in-your-face approach, which the quadrant 4, because it can be quite blunt, wants to administer on others. So if you are doing quadrant 4 yourself, then it's about being aware of the quadrant 1. You go quite well with the quadrant 1 part because it's about big ideas. So those big ideas will come from the quadrant 4 when it twists and turns something around to make it something else. So it gives them the opportunity to become bigger. And the quadrant 1 loves that. It just goes ape when it gets that. The quadrant 4 also will generally go quite well with the quadrant 2 part, because the quadrant 2 part is about doing things right, and the quadrant 4 loves to have things done right and have the report on my desk by Monday morning, even if that quadrant 4 part is a new recruit to the practice. So we'll see that sort of that trait if that happens to be the case. The quadrant 3 part is sensitive to this. If you do quadrant 4 really well, then it is really about taking some very deep breaths and making sure you're not too confrontational with the quadrant 3 part, and then it will produce really well. You can sort of give yourself a time to sit beside it. I know, when time is important to the quadrant 4, because time is money, so to speak, and it will want to get in there and get things done and move on to the next thing. When you're dealing with the quadrant 3 part, it is about taking time. The time will pass, and try not to look at your watch. Quadrant 3 probably doesn't have a watch anyway, because it gets really involved in the person, in the event, in the technical thing they're doing. So, yeah, that would be the 4 part of us. It's about, bottom line, it's about getting results done, and then more getting it based on an experience, instead of going and see what happens and then change.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as you said, it is quite rare, but we do sometimes see glimpses of it in all of us, especially when we're talking about things like outreach, expansion, marketing. What may be quite common here, and I've done this in various workshops we run through the Quest model, is to say, give me 6 new ideas to create even more expensive marketing in your community by the end of the month. And people will kind of fire up in their quadrant 4-ness with that sort of thing. So, that's the sort of way that we may bring that alive and relate to that quadrant 4-ness. Someone sitting deeply in quadrant 4, as you said, probably one warning I would have about this is, if as a principal chiropractor, as you mentioned, you're very entrepreneurial, you're very get out there and expand the business, expand the practice, expand the impact, you're probably bringing your own quadrant 4 alive, which can be abrasive to the other quadrants, depending on how that is communicated. And so this is really coming to the bottom line of this podcast, which is, no matter where your own preferences are, and you will have more than one, I like the phrase that you used, Mark, which is apply your flexibility to be able to relate and communicate and help develop the person within their current quadrant preferences at this moment in time in your practice, the way that they're playing out.
Yeah, exactly. And if we extrapolate it out to the rest of the team, that if we're all improving our own position, and that's really the only thing we have control over, and this is one of the challenges of practice, is that we've got to deal with other people. And, that's the nature of our business. Even if it's not our team, if we're just a solo practitioner, we've still got all these practice members coming through all day long who are coming from one of these 4 primary quadrants. Sometimes, we're very even with all of them. That's a whole other story anyway. But there's a challenge that is purely on our shoulders, and that is, do I know myself well enough to be able to be flexible enough to meet the other person where they're at and work with them in the model that will get them firing, and that then it allows them to ascend. So if we have a block in our communication at whatever level, from inspiration through teaching, through coaching, through experiential behaviors. Anytime we're closed down in an area, it stops the flow from one to the other. And so we don't ascend as well as we could. So we want to have a practice that's evolving all the time, which is it's an ascension pathway that we're offering to ourselves, to our team, and then to our practice members. One of the challenges here is to get the movement between those 4 quadrants as quick as possible. So we can, click, click, click through them. And that then allows more lightness of being. But opens it up. It's like going up the journey scale, So from stuckness and closed downness and frustration, therefore, because, we're not in what we want out of our practice, and certainly the team aren't either, to one of flexibility and fluidness and an ascending viewpoint on life. So that lightens us up, lightens our load, enlightens us, and allows more light to be emanating. So, so that's
beautiful. Beautiful. Well, let's leave the listeners with some really quick tips. So the first one I would ask you is, if they are feeling stuck and slow and subluxated, what would be an immediate action step to take?
Behaviors are a fun thing to do because they push buttons. So if, you sort of have a place for everything that happens to be across the floor and hanging off all sorts of different places around the bedroom, for example, then do a not me behavior week where everything gets folded and neatly put away and it's in its right place for the week. If you have a tendency to leave dishes in the sink until there's no more silverware or whatever, then commit to cleaning up everything before you go to bed at night.
Yep.
I've
got one to throw in that may be really challenging. If your CAs are always telling you that you're running late, then do your adjustments in half the time.
Yeah.
Is that hitting your raw nerve for you, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're feeling stuck, do not me behaviors. And if you want some help with this, there's some other resources around that. So then that's one really, really powerful action step. If you're listening to this and you're not really sure how to understand someone else's worldview preferences, then what would be an immediate action step to take?
Well, I mean, if it's within the practice, within the team, I'd definitely do the Innate Model quiz and have a conversation together as a team, so that it's quite transparent. This Paula likes the Quadrant 1 preference, and Fred likes 2, and David likes the 3. So we have an awareness of each other's strengths and areas of interest, so we can then hold each other accountable to feeding to us in a way that we understand.
Great.
So that way, it just breaks down all the convention, all the guessing, and it's just like, hey, David, when you speak with me, that tone of tell, or yell, whatever it is, I feel scared. That stops my willingness to engage. So, is it possible that we can do it differently? And would you like me to teach you how I like to have that done, or I like to learn and so forth? So there's it opens up our vulnerability, but also increases our camaraderie.
Yeah, beautiful. So you rolled in 2 action steps there. One, if you don't know, understand, intuit other people's preferences within your team, run the Innate Model. It's really easy. It gives you a really brilliant report. And then the other one is, if you're not skilled in how to relate and communicate to a different quadrant, then lean into vulnerability. I think those are really good action steps that we just talked about. Probably the first one is also, the not me is also quite a bit of vulnerability. So maybe that's a key to what we're doing here is shifting from our own preference.
Yeah, that's why I suggested maybe in the bedroom, so no one else knows.
So don't tell your CA to cut your adjustment times in half.
See, that one depends on the inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely.
At a plane to catch, then all of a sudden things seem to turn around.
Absolutely. Yeah, suddenly I can adjust in a lot less time, can't I? Yeah. If there's a hard deadline. Well, so we've mentioned a couple of resources as well, the Innate Model, lots of stuff around not-me behavior and the vulnerabilities, lots of other stuff that that people can look for. And, you know, the more we lean into this, as you said, the more we lean into our flexibility, and we find that we move with light and things develop and open up and expand of their own accord. And it's just such a beautiful thing. So I'm really grateful to you, Mark, for bringing this and sharing this and helping enlighten all of us in how we do better playing in this world.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. I think the sum total of that would be that your practice becomes more attractive. You become more attractive to your people, and they become more attracted to themselves as well. And so, you know, we'll put a note in the show notes here on the link to get hold of the Attractive Practice Model for Chiropractors, which is a book that expands on what we discussed here today quite extensively. I know that you get great value out of it.
Yes, lots of value in there. And I know that that is to be shared with the professions. That part of your mission is to help the profession level up and move up and expand and do even better at contributing to this world that we're in.
Certainly is.
Thank you, Mark.